All right, it says midnight. That's where I'm at. I'm on the central time zone. So here it is midnight. I know we're probably all over the world, all different time zones. Some people are staying up late with me, and that's awesome. I'm super excited to get started. So I hope that you went through these prerequisites, as I was saying. I'm just going to do a quick kind of run through with them. First, you should have npm and node installed. And if you're not familiar with them, that is a runtime for JavaScript. We're going to be using it because we are going to be using JavaScript and TypeScript and Node in order to build out our component. You should also have the .NET 4.6.2 developer pack installed. That's required for building our component. The PowerApps CLI, so that's what we're going to be using to actually create the project and the solution and the deployment package. And then Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio 2017. You should have one of those installed so we can actually write our code, right? We need an IDE in order to do that. And then optional is Windows Terminal. I love Windows Terminal. I'm going to be using that. But you can also use the developer terminal with Visual Studio 2017. You can use the command prompt. And then you can also use the developer console. And you might want to use that one if you don't have the MS build set up in your path, since we're going to need that for building our solution. So welcome. This session is build your own PowerApps component. We are going to be using the Learn module, so you'll see the short link in the bottom of the screen here. You'll want to grab that, and the moderators will also put that in the chat for you as well. That'll bring you to the Learn module that we're going to be going through today. So we're going to be using the PCF, the PowerApps Component Framework, and we're going to be going through this Learn module. And if you're not familiar with Learn, it's Microsoft's learning platform, and it's really cool because it has these step-by-step guides to go over all this different technology and to really help you learn. So I'm excited to show this one to you. So here's the agenda for today. We'll do some welcome, some introductions. We'll go through the full PowerApps component, and then we'll have time for questions. But definitely continue to ask questions throughout the chat. We have some awesome people that will be answering questions throughout. So here's our team of people today. These are our moderators, so they will be in the chat. They'll be answering questions as you're going. Don't be shy, definitely ask as you're going. And then we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. And I'm Cassie Brevu, so I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. And I actually focus on AI and XR, but my background was actually a citizen developer like 9 or 10 years ago. I started teaching myself to code when I was a data analyst. And so I'm definitely like still kind of a citizen dev inside me, but even though I'm a pro dev now. And so I'm excited to kind of show you some of these things. And maybe there's some people on this call that are the citizen devs and this is your first time kind of jumping into code. And then I'm sure there's also pro devs on this call that are more familiar with web technologies and just wanting to learn how they can use skills they already have to build PowerApps components. So some housekeeping, this session is being recorded, and ask lots of questions. So here's our code of conduct. Basically, let's be kind to each other. We're here to learn, and let's be respectful and just, basically let's be kind. So prerequisites, again, we already kind of talked through these, but here you'll see again, we're going to use that PowerApps CLI. We're going to be using Node.js, VS Code, TypeScript. And the worker school account, that's an optional prerequisite because in order to sign into PowerApps, you do need a worker school account. But we're going to be building the component, and we're not going to actually import it into PowerApps. You can do this full module without logging in to PowerApps. But if you want to do that later, you will need a worker school account to do that. So that's kind of like an optional prereq. Okay, so let's do first a little bit of a review because maybe not everybody knows what a Power App is. Like maybe you have a pro dev on here that's like, my company wants me to start building Power Apps and I don't know what they are and I want to learn more. And so basically what they are is they're like a no code or low code way to build business solutions. And so it allows citizen developers like BAs and PMs to go build a solution without necessarily needing a developer resource, which is really important in companies. So I actually used to work at a law firm, and sometimes, different business lines, they need something, a business process app, but there was no developer resource for them. And so they'd be kind of left on their own, and they would sometimes use SharePoint. And then we also had our BAs and PMs that would sometimes work with different product lines, and they would use SharePoint. So when PowerApps came out, we're super, super excited because now these users were empowered to build what they need, and they didn't necessarily have to wait for IT. So PowerApps are really, really cool. They can definitely just make you feel like you can do something that you couldn't do before. But then sometimes there's things that you need more custom, right? Like out of the box solutions don't necessarily work for everything, every problem you're trying to solve. And so that's when the functionality of the custom components come in that we're going to be building today. So what that does is it allows you to take that developer resource, or maybe you're a citizen dev that's curious about becoming more of a pro dev, and you can build out a component and then start customizing the PowerApps to better serve your business and to build those solutions that you need. So let's take a quick look at PowerApps. So if you were to log into PowerApps, you would see this homepage here, and this is where you go to start. I'm on the Create tab. This is where you go to start building out different PowerApps. So if you look here, you can get data from a lot of different sources. You can use SharePoint, you can use Excel, you can use SQL Server, and then you can also use something called the Common Data Service. And so if you're not familiar with the Common Data Service, so it's running on the back end of Dynamics 365 and PowerApps, and it's an important part of the Power Platform. And if you're more familiar with SQL, the Common Data Service is using entities, which would be like the same as a SQL table. So if you're familiar with that kind of data structure, the Common Data Service will come really natural to you. And then we have different templates here. So one thing that I think is really helpful when you're starting to try different things is having a starting point. Like sometimes getting started is the hardest part, right? And so there's all these awesome templates in here that can help you get started with something that you're trying to build. So if you're trying to build a budget tracker or a service desk, you can jump right into that and then you can start customizing. So that's just a little quick introduction to what PowerApps are. So now let's talk a little bit more about PCF, the PowerApps component framework, and the code components that we're going to be building today. So if you are a pro dev and you've done web development, we're going to be using things that you're familiar with, like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and they even support React and Angular, so you can use modern frameworks. And what the PCF stands for is a PowerApps component framework, and they're going to be, but I'm going to be talking about code components as well. It's interchangeable. Or well, the code components was created by the PowerApps component framework side. That's what I meant to say. So I'm going to be calling them code components as we go through. And there's something else called the Pcf Sharing Gallery, and I want to show you that quick because sharing is caring, right? That's why we're here. We're all sharing knowledge and fun. But this is the Pcf Gallery. So there's people that have built different components and put them out there, and then you can just go grab them. So maybe there's something that out of the box that doesn't work for you, but there's something that somebody else built and then went and shared with the community, and you might be able to just grab one of those. So that's something to be aware of. And also, if you build something, you can then share that with the community. So let's talk about the different component elements that are made up in the component to make the component. So we have the manifest, and the manifest is just an XML document, and that's going to describe the component to the framework or to the PowerApps, right? So it's going to have different things like the namespace and the name. We're going to tell it the component type, so we need to know if it's a field or a data set type. We are going to have a resource file, so the resource files are like my CSS, if I'm importing a script, my images, and so we're going to actually build our own CSS. But you can use CSS libraries like Bootstrap if that's what you're more familiar with, and then you can just import those in the resource. We're going to be creating a TypeScript, so we're going to be using TypeScript, which if you're not familiar with TypeScript, it's a subset of, or a superset of JavaScript that allows you to do static types on JavaScript, which is a dynamic language. And then we're going to create our index.ts file, and that's going to be where we put all of our main code in. That's going to interact with our PowerApps. So the PowerApps code component has a life cycle, and so there's some different methods that are actually required in order to make that work. So we have the init, and that's our initialization, something very familiar to the devs out there, right? We got to initialize our component. We have our update view, and our get components, and then our destroy. So these are the different methods that we need in order to build out our component, but it's all created for us through the CLI, which is pretty cool. And then I'm very much a visual learner, so when I start to understand how the different frameworks in the like communication go, I really love these graphics. And so I grabbed this actually from our own docs. And this kind of shows you how those different methods interact with our host, which is our PowerApps, and how those notifications and how the init method is called. And so I just want to bring this now, show it again later after we kind of build it out, because I think it might make even more sense then. But just this is the overall architecture of how they work. So if you didn't already go to the PowerApp component Learn module, check it out here. Again, it should be in the link. We will get started building out our component now. So let me get a little sip of water here. So this is the component that we're going to be building out today. And if you look here, it's just a slider control, something you're probably familiar with. You know, you slide it down, it goes lower, up, it goes higher. So that's the custom control that we're going to be building. We talked about the prereqs. They're also listed out in this module. And I want to quickly point out that this Learn module is actually part of something called a learning path. And in Microsoft Learn, so this is the Learn platform that we're using, right? There's a lot of different stuff in there. There's a lot of different learning paths. And it's really cool because like if you were to come in and just be like, I want to learn something about this, but I don't know where to start. It has an introduction module. We're going through the build a PowerApps component. But then after this, you could go through and use the advanced one. So definitely check that out later. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, well, I'm going to go to the directory that I want. So I actually set up a profile on my Windows terminal that has my directory and everything all set for me. So if you haven't used Windows Terminal before, this is a command line front end, and it allows you to have all these different terminals all within one client, which is so cool. I love it. So I have my I command you, which is my default terminal, and then I have my build terminal that I made just for this session. And it's because you can easily, it's so easy, it's just JSON to update these. And then I have like my data science one. And anyways, this isn't a Windows terminal talk, but that's what I'm using. But if you're using a different one, a different terminal, it's totally fine. So the first thing we need to do is make our directory for our component. So there we go. I'm going to make that directory. I'm then going to go to that directory. And if you look now, we just have an empty directory. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is initialize my PowerApps component app. So if you take a look here, you'll see that we have PAC, and this is what's going to actually activate our PowerApps component CLI. And if you're not, CLI is command line interface, and they're super powerful. And if you're not comfortable with them, I definitely recommend getting more comfortable with them. They are really cool to use. They're really fun. And then the other thing that I just saw, actually, I want to show you this, which I think is really cool. This came out like 3 days ago. There is a VS Code plugin for the CLI that allows you to use the command palette and access the CLI functionality. So if you really hate CLIs and you're just like, I don't want to get on that bandwagon, you could install this particular one as well. And I will put this in, or I'll have, this will go in the chat here in a second because I don't think I shared that one because I literally just found out about it. I'm like, that is so cool. Okay, sorry, go back to my module. I get excited about cool things like that. All right, so let's talk more about the CLI that we're using. So PAC, I put that in and you see, and I can get different information about the CLI. So if you're coming here and you're trying to use this and you're like, I don't remember any of those commands, of course you can just Google them, but you can also put the activation in and then take a look. The other thing with CLIs that's really nice is most of them have -H or help. So you can see right here, this one has help. So if you did PAC help, you'll get more information. And you can see that we're going to be using the PCF. So this is the PowerApps component framework. But we also are going to be using the solution one to create our solution. But since I am a good lazy developer, I'm just going to use the copy paste here. And you can take a look at what's here. So we're calling the init on the PCF from our CLI, and we're getting the namespace, the name, and then the type, which is field. And what that's going to do is it's going to initialize my project for me. So now if I were to take a look at what's in there, I can see that I now have my projects started for me, which is pretty cool, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is npm install, and this is going to install all my packages that I need. So if you look here, you see this packages.json. In there, it has all these different dependencies that's needed. And when I run npm install, which npm is the package manager for Node, it's going to look at that and it's going to download all my packages that I need in order to run my project. And if, like, since I come from a .NET background, if you are a .NET person and you're familiar with NuGet and you're using .NET Core and you do .NET Restore, that's the same thing as npm install. So it might take me a minute, or take it a minute here, lots to install. Hopefully yours is working. Cool. Okay, so we have our dependencies. You can ignore all the warnings. And then we are going to be using the code IDE. So VS Code is a really lightweight IDE, and I absolutely love it. And it has also this CLI. And if I just type code in here, I can take a look at some of the, oops, no, that's not what I wanted to do. I think it's code-h. I think I forgot the -h. There we go. So -h is something you can use on like a lot of different ones to get information. So what I did actually was just open code. If you just type code into there, it's going to open up the CLI. But if I do -h, I can see all the different things that I can do with VS Code. I particularly love the diff because many times when you're programming, you need to know like what's different between two files. And you can just do code-d and then bring in two files and it'll open up a code instance with the diff loaded. But we want to open up our current directory in an instance of VS Code. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, so we now have our project created through the CLI, and now we have it open in our VS Code instance. I am going to show you just quickly here. Here's the package.json that I was telling you about that has our dependencies. And I'm going to take a look now at our manifest. So as we talked about in the beginning, and I'm going to wrap this so you can see it better. There we go. As we talked about in the beginning, we have the manifest, which is one of the parts of our code component that we need to fill out and tell PowerApps what to expect. And so the first thing I want to do is update my control. So this tells me more information about the control. You can see it has my namespace, the constructor, the display name, the version, and the description. So I'm going to copy and paste this in. And you can see that this updated the version and gave us a better description. And then I'll just click save or control. I'm doing Control S for save. Hopefully you're doing the same. You want to save lots, right? And then the next thing we want to do is update the property. So this is going to give PowerApps information about the property, which is the slider value. So that's the slider value, and that's what we're going to be sending back to PowerApps. And one thing I want to show you as well is always remember docs is your friend, and docs has lots of information. So if we go and take a look at the, I'm in the manifest schema for PowerApps, you can take a look at the control and then you can see all the different attributes that are available to that and what they mean and how to use them. You can go to the property one, and again, you can see the different properties that are needed. And that can be helpful if you're trying to build something out and you don't know what you need to do in order to get the right properties. So the next thing we want to do is add a property group. And this is a property group type of number. So if you see, we have of type group. And so I want to paste that in below here. And that's going to give us a group of all of these different types. So again, if I go back to this here and I take a look at the different types that are available to me. So I could do a single type, which are all of these. Maybe it's an email or phone number, text, like it's not always going to be a group. But then we have these different groups that are available to us here. And in the groups, if I scroll down, you can see here's some numbers and strings and dates. And so we have the option of creating these different groups of properties. All right. So we have created our property, our control, we've given it a type. The next thing we want to do is add in a resource file. So we are going to go down to the resources tag and we're going to add in our CSS. And you can see we already have a code tag with our index.ts here. So I'm going to copy that in and save it. But now we need to add this file. This file does not exist yet. So we're going to go over to our window over here and we're going to say new folder, and then we want to add a CSS folder because you can see that this is a CSS folder that has a CSS file in it. And then we're going to create this file within that folder. That is going to give us an empty file in order for us to put our code in. So the other thing right now, if you are behind it all or you're having any issues, this step 5 here is all of the code that we've done so far. So if I hit copy on this and I just Control A, Control V, I am actually now set to the exact same place where we were. So if you need a quick catch up, maybe you were still installing something, just go ahead and copy and paste step 5 in. Okay, so now let's fill out our CSS. And again, we're just going to copy and paste the CSS in. And let me now show you a little bit. So if you're not familiar with CSS and HTML, I'm going to just do like a very simple, quick demo here using the W3 Schools editor. So with the component, you're going to see how we're going to be creating the different HTML elements that they need in order to build it. And so if you're not familiar with what HTML element is, that is what this is. This is an HTML tag creating the heading over here. This is a paragraph. And then there's the style, and the style is what makes the page look like this, right? So without the style, there would be nothing. So if I do that, look, my style is gone. I want style back. Cool. So just so you understand what's happening with that file, this is what's giving the application style. And so the dot means it's a class. So we have the different classes that are created. You can see that there's a lot of different properties on here. But yeah, so, and again, if you're like me and I don't really like writing my own CSS, I like using like Bootstrap, you can do that too. You don't have to write your own CSS for it or whatever. Maybe your company even has custom CSS that you are supposed to use with all your components or with all your applications. All right, so the next thing we want to do now is run our build. And there's an integrated terminal in Visual Studio Code, which I think is pretty cool. So we can run it there or we can run it in our instance here. I don't know why this is activating my Conda environment. So Conda is a distribution for Python, and I do use that for machine learning. And for some reason, sometimes the VS Code's activating that environment. So I'll just go back to this one and use this. So let's do npm run build. And so you should be able to do that, like I said, in the integrated terminal or with whatever terminal you're using. And now what this is going to do is it's actually going to grab my TypeScript and transpile it to JavaScript and bundle it in an output folder. And it's using Webpack, and Webpack is a bundler for JavaScript. And you can see here that we have our bundle.main. And so now if I were to go back to my VS Code instance, you'll see we have this new file here with the out. You can see that this is our ready to deploy, well, not ready yet because we still have to add it to solution, but this is our transpiled JavaScript that we would use. And then you can see here also in the window or in the terminal, it has some explanation there as well. So we are actually ready to start building out the code part of it. So as we said before, the index.ts is where we're going to put all of our logic and our methods are needed. And so the first thing we want to do is add some private properties and private variables to the top here. So I'm going to copy this in, I'm going to paste, I'm going to hit save. That's going to format it for me. And so now let's take a look at what we added in here. So we have a private value, and that's a type of number. And so this is TypeScript because I'm able to add that it is a number, right? I'm adding a private notify output changed. And then I'm adding my HTML elements. So this is a label element. We have an input element. And so when I hover over this, you can see that it knows it's that. But if I were to take this out and hover, it's type of any because it no longer knows what it is. So I'm adding the type. I'm telling it what type of property that is. And then we'll have our container, which is our div element. That's where we're going to put all of our our components, or our tags are going to all go inside that container. And then the context. So this is the context for the framework. And then we have our event listener. So these are the different private variables. And the other thing I want to point out too is this underscore. That's a common naming convention in programming for a private variable. So whenever you see that, you can kind of know, okay, that's a private variable, which means it's only accessible within this class, which is something called encapsulation, but I won't even go into that right now. So the next thing we want to do now, I think I went too far, is the init method. So I am going to copy and paste over this init. And remember, the init is initializing our component. And then you'll see here that it's upset right now because I haven't added the refresh data in. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to put that in just so there's no red squigglies because we don't like red squigglies. That means things are broken. Cool. So that was step 4, if you just want to paste that in below the init. And let's take a look at what we're getting here. So we're getting the context from the framework, we're getting the notify output change, we're getting the state, and we're getting the container. And then here, we're now going to set those in our private variables. So we have the context, we're creating our div element, so that's the HTML tag that we're creating. We are adding our event listener. We are creating another input. So the input is actually where the slider is. And we're going to give that a type of range. We're going to set the min and the max. So those are the min and max values of the slider. We're going to give it a class. So that CSS class that we added, we're going to add that, and then also the ID to the HTML element. We're doing those same things with our label as well. And then down here, you'll see that we are setting the value. And I want to point out this operator here. And so what this actually means is this is a value test to see if what's before it is true or false. And then based on that condition, if it's true, it takes the first condition, the first value, and if it's false, it takes the second one. And you may look at this and you're like, well, what condition is that? There's something called falsy in JavaScript, and when something's undefined, it's also false. And so that would render to false, or would compile to false, basically. So we have some of those different operators here to then default to 0 if those values are null. And then we are going to append all of that to our div container. And this is our event listener. We're just refreshing that data, which we will you'll see when we do some of the debugging. So the next thing here is we have the update view. Going to copy and paste that in. This is updating the value when the property bag changes. I'll hit save. And again, you can see that we're updating the context value and the inner HTML. Next, we are going to grab the get outputs. This is again that's going to call back to our framework. So if you remember from that graphic, which I'll show you right now again. So the get outputs, remember that's how it's contacting back to the component and then sending that back to our host to our PowerApp. And then last but not least, we have to clean up after ourselves. So we want to remove the HTML element from the DOM. And so we're going to put in our destroy. So just like we have to tell our kids that they have to clean up after themselves, we as programmers also have to clean up after ourselves. So now we should be good. We've built out the full index.ts file. And if you got behind on that or you're having any issues, you're missing a bracket somewhere and you don't know where it is, you can just copy and paste step 8 in completely to the TS file and you'll be caught up. That is our full code. So the next thing we want to do now is run our build again. So we're going to do npm run build. And it's going to now take those updates, create our package, create our output, and everything built. Cool. So now let's take a look at what this looks like. So there's a really cool testing environment that is part of the framework. So I'm going to go npm start watch, and the watch is going to do something for me that's called hot reloading. And what hot reloading does is that means that now every time I want to start, or every time I want to change something in my code and then test it in my UI, I don't have to stop this run and then go change it and then rebuild and see it again. As soon as I hit save on my file, it's going to push it out to my app here, or my component. So this is the component that we just built. You can see the slider here, and you can see when I move it that you can see the value changing. And you can see the different context inputs. So here, when you create a Power App, you tell it whether it's a web or like a website, a tablet, or a phone template. So you can test different ones there. You can set different container widths and heights because sometimes the CSS can get weird if you have lots of elements. You want to make sure everything's looking the way that it should at different heights and widths. And then we have our data input. So this is the slider value, which is showing here, and I can also update this here. And then if you take a look, here are the types. So if you remember in the XML document when we were giving the different type values, this is where that's displayed. So maybe we want it to be a decimal or maybe it's currency. You can test those out and make sure everything looks correct. And then here's our output. So this is the slider value, and that's what gets sent back to PowerApps. So that's the output of this control. I am going to Control-C to terminate this for now. So you can see that here, because next we want to build out our solution. So if you take a look here, the next thing we want to do is make the directory for our solution. So going to copy and paste that in. And then we're going to cd to solutions. And you'll see that we have our empty directory. And so now we're going to go back to our CLI, our pack CLI. And we're going to create a solution and we're going to do init. So if you remember from before when we hit pack and we saw that there was, hit pack and we saw that there were different available options. So we did the PCF, now we're ready to create our solution. So I'm going to hit copy here. And so what we're going to do is it's going to create the solution project for us, and we're going to give it a publisher name. Ours is MS Learn, and MSL yours might be different, or you can leave the default, and you're just going to hit enter, and that's going to now initialize our solution. And then next we need to connect that to our component that we created. So we're going to add a reference, and I want to update the path. So I'm going to delete out this path here, and I'm going to grab this path. And now that's going to add that reference to my solution. So the next thing that we are going to want to do here is, so let me take a look at the chat and see if there's any questions. Oh, the moderators should be answering those. I'm just taking a peek here. Cool. So, okay, where are we at? Build. We need to build it. So we're going to build our solution, and we're going to be using MS Build to build our solution. And if you're using Windows Terminal and you haven't set up your path variable for MS Build, you might get an error. So I'm going to put this command in, and you only have to run /restore on the first one, so it can build my solution. And while it does that, I'm going to show you quickly, if you need to update your path variables and you're not familiar with that, if you type path, it'll bring up your system properties. You go into environment variables, you go to the path, and in here, you can set up the directory to your MS Build. And so this is where mine is located. So if I were to open up a file explorer and take a, oops. Okay, File Explorer doesn't want to come up. But basically that's where my MS Build lives. And yeah, so if you have any issues with your MS Build, it might be that you need to update your path. If you're using your developer console, you shouldn't have that issue. It's built into that Visual Studio developer console. And yeah, but even if you can't, we're not actually going to go through and install that into PowerApps today. So if you can't create the solution, that's still fine. Just know that those are probably some ways that you could fix it. And then if I take a look now, so if I go to Explorer, or yeah, why does my window keep opening up on the wrong screen? There we go. Okay. And I go to my bin, I can see now that I have a debug output and I have my solution.zip. And this is what I actually upload into PowerApps to add my component. And if I wanted to do a release build, I just would use this command here. So if I now I will get a new build, and you can see that it's creating the bin in the release, and then it'll put that output in the release folder. So that is how we package our component for PowerApps. So there we go. So there is our zip solution that we would use. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how we can debug our solution. So I am going to go back and to where my component lives. I'm going to do npm start watch again. So So I'm going to start up my test environment, and I'm going to show you some different quick debugging tricks that you can do when working with JavaScript in the browser. All right, so I'm going to hit F12, and that's going to bring up my developer tools in my instance. And so that's the same for Chrome and Edge, or I'm not sure about Firefox, but anyways, so that's going to bring up my tools. Here you can see that I have PCF tools, and if I go into here, you can see this is our TypeScript. So here's our actual component that we are building out. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my refresh data. And I'm going to add out some logging so that we can take a look at what's happening. So I'm going to go console.log, and I'm going to go this._value. Save. And now when that saves, you're going to notice it's going to refresh over here because it added that. So now this value is added, or this logging is added. And now every time I change this, I'm going to see an output in my console down here. But let's say I prefer breakpoints, or maybe I want to see really kind of step into what's happening at the time of run. I'm going to delete this out. Back to here. Oops, no, wrong one. There you go. Okay, and then here I can now click on the line that I want my breakpoint to stop. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop the code execution at that point, and I'm going to be able to look at what's happening. So I'm going to move this, and you'll see that it's paused at my debugger. And I can now take a look and hover over and see the different values here. And I can also go into my debugging console down here and type this.value, and you can see that our new value is 389, and you can still see that the old one's 385. So when I go ahead and finish this, you'll see that now it is all updated. So those are two different common ways that, and really useful things that you'll use when you are debugging with JavaScript and debugging your components. So if we were doing a field one, but if you were doing like a grid one and you need to upload data and try that out, there's that within the testing environment, you can select and upload a file, which I think is pretty sweet. Here's some different information about different tools. Oh, that's right. I was going to show you one other thing on the testing environment. If you want to take a look at the element that we created, you can right click and inspect elements. And then now we're taking a look at that HTML. So we see our input, we see our type, we see our min and our max. We see the class, the ID, we can see the label input. And so you can see that this was all those properties that we were setting, or the variables that we were setting. And that's what it looks like in HTML in the browser. So we can also then inspect and look at those values. And so in the Learn module, these are just some of those things that you just saw about different ways that you can debug your component. And I won't quiz you, so I won't go over the quiz questions. But yeah, so that is how we build out a custom component for PowerApps. If you were web dev, you're like, I've already done it just without creating the solution and understanding the life cycle of the page for PowerApps. So here is a bit of a review. If you missed anything, I have a complete list of resources at that short link that goes to a GitHub page that I set up on my GitHub. It has the full source control of everything that we did as well, so you could clone that if you wanted, but you probably just built it. And then there's also a list of all those links. So the links to the Learn module and to the different docs that I was showing you, so the manifest and all of that. So all those resources are there, as well as probably put in the chat for you. So thank you so much. Don't let the learning stop here, right? We're going to go through some questions now. And yeah, I hope you learned some things and that you like building PowerApps. Well, actually, I think I can keep that up, right? And then let me get over to the chat here. So let me put on my headphones in case people are talking to me, because I won't hear you if you are. So do the moderators, let's see, it looks like they are answering some. And if the moderators have any questions that they like saw there that they want to ask me, feel free to do that. But I will just kind of try to read through some of them now as well. So I see one that says, do you need to be familiar with TypeScript to build a component? Yeah, you know, I think it's a really great way to start learning TypeScript, honestly. Like it helps to know it, but when you come into something like this and it's kind of already like you already know what methods need to be there, and you can kind of start playing around, and we have different samples out there. That's the other thing, that we just went over one sample component. There's a whole library of sample components on Docs. And so one of the really great ways, I think, to start learning is to jump into something that's already there and then kind of like reverse engineer what's happening. And so if you're not familiar with TypeScript, this would be a really great way to start learning more about it. I see 1 a.m. on the East Coast. Awesome. Thanks for staying up. So another one, it looks like, can the PowerApps be deployed on premise? And yeah, they are cloud service. 11 p.m. in Costa Rica. It's so cool that, like, I really love this digital format and being able to like talk to people in all these different places from my home, right? Like, and I know it's a weird time, right? But I feel like we're making the best of it. That's what all we can do, right, is do our best. So I see some questions about the life cycle, and I see that he answered that with those methods that we talked about. So that's the page life cycle that we need in order to interact with PowerApps. So yeah, I see someone about going through the steps. I hope you were able to go through the steps, and if you had any issues, I hope that you are asking them. And see, so where does the Pcf install to? Let me scroll to the bottom and see if there's any. Thing that hasn't been answered. See some WebAssembly questions. So if you're C# and you prefer Blazor versus for your front end, for Blazor, we haven't put them together yet. So there's no Blazor. So I think it is just TypeScript or JavaScript. But like, so because I come from a C# background, I was always like, I wasn't a huge fan of JavaScript right away because I really liked C# and all the different tooling within it. But TypeScript really like changed everything for me. TypeScript was a game changer because it makes it feel more like C# because I can make it more statically typed. I can get more IntelliSense, and it can feel more like cohesive from going from C# to TypeScript. Oh, the life cycle. Okay, so I forgot to show you how we import this. Thank you for asking that question. I don't know if this is what you meant, but let me go back to here. So once that component is created, we would import it into our PowerApps. And so we have that solution.zip, and I would go into my solutions here, and then I can import. So if I go back to here, you can see, I'm not going to go through these steps, so I'm going to show you the docs page. And again, this is available both on that GitHub, and I will paste it in the chat here as well. Oh, awesome. The moderators are already on it. Thank you. And so first you would import that zip file. So just like you would import anything, you would browse, you would grab that, import, close. Okay, pretty simple. That's how you get it into PowerApps. And then once it's there in your Power App, you can import it. You import component, you go to insert import, right? And then from there you go to a code component, you select the component that you created, And from there, then you'd see it in your possible components to then drag and drop onto your UI. So that's how you actually integrate it back in to PowerApps. So thank you for that question, because I forgot to do that part, tell you that part. And then this is that GitHub that I was talking about with all these different resources. Is there any sample components with docs with how to read and write from Dynamics 365 entity? I am pretty sure there is stuff on Learn for that, for working with Dynamics 365. And I'd have to look and get those resources. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go and I'll find some good resources, because I don't have them just off the top of my head. And I can add them to this GitHub page for you to get some better examples. And then the sample components, I'm not sure if I know exactly where those are. I know that there's like a link to them in here somewhere. But then the other thing for sample components is you could also just go to the Pcf gallery and check out these as sample components too. So there is a library of sample components somewhere in the documentation here. The other interesting thing about NPM is that Microsoft just bought them, which is pretty sweet, because NPM is super integral in Node to JavaScript and TypeScript development. And it's a centralized package resource. And so I think it's pretty amazing that we bought them. I love the question about code spaces. I don't have this set up to do code spaces, but I like that. It's a good question. And you know, code spaces is VS Online. Code spaces replaced VS Online. I see you say code spaces or VS Online. Okay, I think I got through all the questions in the chat. Is there any? So that is a really good question. I have not used much of the less and Sass CSS stuff, because I'm really not a CSS person. Like, I use Bootstrap and then I'm like, cool. So I'm pretty sure you could, but I don't actually know the answer to that, to be honest. Maybe Greg knows. It looks like he's replying. So I'm just curious how many people actually went through and were able to complete it, or were you just kind of watching this like an FYI, seeing if you were curious, or any kind of input on that? Well, let me go back to this thank you too, because I would we want your feedback. So there's evals there, the short link to go and fill out an eval for this session. Please let us know if it's useful, and let us know what we can do better, because we always want to try to make these better and make sure that they're useful and what people need. So I see, how do we actually import something from the Pcf gallery? So the same way that you would import it if you created it, it's that .zip file. So the Pcf gallery, you would download it and then just import it into your solution. Oh, and Greg is on it. Greg is on it with the answer questions. Thank you, Greg. Moderators are wonderful people. I see you have the evals there. Oh, so the other thing is it looks like there's some different Learn modules, like at learn/PCF, that has more information. So maybe that will have anything of the Dynamics 365, although I don't think so. I think I'll still need to find that. But anyway, so check out the Learn module. There's a cloud skill challenge that they're doing. You might want to check that out. You can win prizes and I think money too. I don't know the full details on that. And then Learn TV. So Learn TV is a new thing that we are launching with Build, and it's going to be 24/7 live coding with hands-on videos and examples A lot of my team, the Azure advocates, will be on there doing things. I will definitely be on there, so check that out. I think it's really cool. Don't let the learning stop here. Like, there's just so much to do. There's so much to learn, and we're really excited to share it with you on Learn TV. Okay, I think that's the real end. Is there any other questions or? Oh, someone said they got theirs working. Awesome. Well, and thank you, Alexi. Alexi, is that how you say it? Thank you for coming. I hope you had fun. I don't know. I think that we can end early if there's no more questions, or I don't know how much more time we have. Oh, okay. I see in the chat it's my call. So, all right, I will end here and sign off. Thank you for staying up late with me, those that did, and see you next time. See you on Learn TV.